Welcome to the Invest Smarter podcast. Today, we're going to be covering inherited IRAs. This will serve as a quick guide to help you understand what to do when you inherit an IRA. So we have our resident CFP in the house, and we're going to test his knowledge on inherited IRAs. So Dave, let's start with spousal inherited IRAs. What are the options in this case when you inherit an IRA from your spouse?
Okay, very simple. The IRA becomes yours, and you have the same lifetime benefit that your spouse would have had if that spouse had not passed away. So you can take the distribution from that IRA over your lifetime.
Great, perfect, awesome. Let's move on to where it gets much more complicated. The non-spousal inherited IRA. So this is when, for instance, you would inherit an IRA from your parent who passed away. So let's just start with, how are distributions taxed in a non-spouse inherited IRA?
Okay, so you would pay ordinary income taxes on any distribution you took out of the IRA, and you do avoid the 10% early withdrawal penalty that normally would occur if you took it out before age 59 and a half.
Okay, and for state taxes, they vary across states, so check with your state. So the rules have changed with the passing of the Secure Act. So let's first just go over quickly what were the rules prior to 2020. So what were the rules prior to 2020 before the Secure Act was passed?
Okay, well, back before January 1st of 2020, if your parent died, you would get an inherited IRA. And the rules that applied back then were that you could take those distributions over your lifetime. So you could have inherited an IRA, and let's say age 45, and then you would have spread out those distributions over your expected lifetime from that point on. So that would be, that's also referred to as the stretch IRA. That is now over.
What is the other option?
There was the 5-year rule, which meant that you would set up a program where you would take the entire distribution from the IRA over a 5-year period.
Okay. Now, what was a benefit of the stretch provision?
The benefit of the stretch was that you would be able to take the distributions from your IRA based on your life expectancy, which would mean that the early distributions would be lower, and later in your life, when you need the money more, you would be taking more out of your IRA. So that
Right.
it kind of it was a real great benefit because you would be able to stretch it out over time, and it would give you less tax impact.
So now, in comes the Secure Act. What is the big change?
Well, with the Secure Act, you must take a complete distribution within 10 years of the date of the death of the parent, let's say.
So we have the 10-year rule now, and there's no more stretch provision.
You have to take it all out within 10 years. So, and there is no, required minimum distribution. You can take it out whenever you want over those 10 years. And that's the new way of doing it.
So does this make it a little bit more complicated in terms of planning? Because depending on the size of the inherited IRA and the taxable distributions that you have to take, there now is some planning, right?
There is a lot more planning now with the new Secure Act, because you now must take this income over 10 years. So you have to think about, what years would be the best years to take that money out. And generally speaking, you would try to take it out in your lowest income years, let's say lowest earning years. However, if you receive this, 10-year IRA when you're age 45 and your peak working years, you're going to be taking it out over one of those 10 years or spread it out over 10 years. And if it's big enough, it could push you into a higher tax bracket. So it really depends. If you're age 65 when you get it and entering retirement, then, you can take that money out and postpone Social Security, try to keep yourself in the lowest tax bracket, but provide income to yourself from it. And so there is a lot of planning that can go into, receiving an inherited IRA.
You don't want to start handing over money to the government that you don't need to.
True. But the government wants your money. The government wants your money. So that's why they passed this new law.
Yep. The whole reason. Is there any considerations in terms of financial aid?
Yes, because For instance, if you have children going to college and the government's going to look back over 2 years to see what your income was, if you were to take a big distribution out of your inherited IRA, it could push you out of the ability to get aid for college education. So, maybe if you have kids going to college, you wouldn't want to take those distributions until after they are through with college, if you have that ability.
What about considerations for people that are approaching retirement? So they're planning on getting a paycheck for a few more years. Is maybe there's something different that they should do?
Yes, absolutely. So let's say you received your the inherited IRA at age 63, and you're going to work to age 67. Let's say you would not take IRA distributions during those 4 years. You would take it after that when you're retired and your income drops. So now you can supplement your income by taking your IRA distributions from your inherited IRA for a few years. And you could do that, let's say, until you have to take Social Security, or you have to take required minimum distributions from your existing IRA or 401k. So there would be a window there when it makes sense to tap into the inherited IRA. And this would be something you might want to discuss with your accountant in terms of the income tax impact on that.
So if you're already retired, is there any considerations there? I mean, maybe
Yeah.
there will be some issues with Social Security or Medicare, right?
If you're already retired, let's say you're age 65 and retired, you could elect to take your inherited IRA distributions from age 65 to age 70 and a half when you're required to take your, actually, Social Security starts at age 70, so you could take it for 5 years, supplement your income then, and then take Social Security. Or you could take it to age 72 when required minimum distributions from your existing 401k or IRA have to kick in. So it would enable you to supply yourself with some income without really kicking into a higher tax bracket once you've retired, until other benefits kick in, like Social Security and your other IRA. So it's tricky. I mean, it really requires much more planning than the previous, stretch IRA.
It's important to really map it out and really understand the impacts, because you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you've already done something and you go to file your taxes and you're like, oh, wait, you don't want that situation.
You do not want
that. Before with the stretch, it would be pretty rare for it to really impact when you're stretching it out over such a long time.
Yeah. I mean, the government wants its money. They give you 10 years to fork it over. And remember, the federal government is your partner in your IRA. And the partner just said that I want it over 10 years because I want that tax revenue, and hence the new rules.
Right. So now
Uncle Sam likes this new rule.
Yeah, for sure. So how about someone who had an inherited IRA before 12/31/2019 or before January 1st, 2020, and they were taking RMDs? Do they have to switch to the 10-year rule?
No, your grandfather. That was a good thing about the plan. If your parent or whoever gave you your inherited IRA died before December 31st or on December 31st or earlier of 2019, then you are grandfathered in on the stretch IRA. So congratulations to anyone who got their inherited IRA before 2020. You keep the stretch IRA, which is a big benefit.
Yeah, for sure. Now, are there any exceptions in the Secure Act that will make beneficiaries still eligible for the stretch provision after 2020?
Yes, there are some exceptions. So for instance, if the inherited IRA goes to a minor, the 10-year required distributions does not begin until age of majority, which in most states would be age 18. At that time, the 10-year distribution period would start. So that would be an exception if you are a minor child.
And in that case, the minor has to be a minor and has to be a child of the decedent. Otherwise, it's a 10-year rule, regardless. Yes. And also, if the beneficiary is disabled, chronically ill, those can also be exceptions.
Yes. And I think you should talk, you should talk to your advisor, your accountant, estate planner, when it comes to these exceptions to make sure that everything is done correctly.
Yep. And one more point, certain retirement plans do have different effective dates for this, such as 403Bs and 457 plans or thrift savings plans. The effective date for the 10-year rule on those is actually January 1st, 2022. So you have a little bit more time in that case. Is there anything else we need to cover on the IRA front, inherited IRA front?
I think we've covered all the main points. I mean, there's different scenarios we could talk about, stories of the people that I've talked to about, what happened with them. We can use this to sort of illustrate the new rules.
Yeah, why don't you give us one or two scenarios?
Well, I wrote down a couple. So imagine you receive an inherited IRA after your mother passed away on May 20th of 2021. You will need to withdraw all funds from that inherited IRA by May 20th of 2031. Let's say you're 55 years old and your peak earning years and you have no plans to retire. You can take the money out at any pace you want as long as you withdraw it within 10 years. But let's say you work in a job where your income is variable, let's say sales, and let's say you had a bad year. Sales weren't so good that year. Well, that would be a great year to take some money out of the inherited IRA. You would just try to pick those years, where your income is lower, so you don't push yourself up into a higher tax bracket or lose other benefits, that you may have otherwise have had. Another scenario would be you inherited an IRA from your father who dies on March 3rd of 2022. So we're looking ahead a little bit. Fortunately, your father left you $1 million and you're 63, you're an executive working in a company with a mandatory retirement age of 67. So at age 67, so there'd be 4 years when you wouldn't take any distributions from your inherited IRA. But at age 67, you could begin to take the income out of the inherited IRA. And you could do that for 3 or 4 years, maybe as many as 5, before you're forced to take money out of your regular IRA or 401k, and also before you reach age 70, when you have to begin taking Social Security benefits. Your Social Security benefit will be at its maximum level if you wait to age 70. So if you have enough income to get to age 70 and you have good genes, think you're going to live a long time, then you would take those distributions starting at age 67 up to age 70 to 72. But again, you have 10 years to get it done. So
there you go.
You're just adjusting where you're taking your income from. So that's the strategy. I mean, you really have to figure out where you're going to take your income if you have the flexibility and to minimize your taxes, but, give yourself the benefit of the income when you need it. But I suggest to everyone who inherits an IRA like this to go over these rules with an advisor or your accountant to make sure you nail it down correctly. You don't want to make mistakes in this area.
Yeah, you really don't. It's not as simple as it used to be. So
nope.
With that, we hope you enjoyed this, this sort of guide to your options with an inherited IRA. So thanks for listening, and we look forward to helping you invest smarter in the future.
Thank you. We'll talk to you next time.